Welcome, everyone. We're so glad you're here. Today, we'll explore our food cravings and how they might reflect our unmet needs. Most of us are here because we're on our own trauma healing journey or support others on theirs. Many of us read The Body Keeps the Score from our founder, Dr. Bessel van der Kolk. In it, we learn that body-based approaches are very effective for working through psychological trauma. The reason is that since trauma alters our nervous systems, including the nervous system in the healing process is critical. That's what somatic treatments do. And utilizing a combination of therapies is very important because no single approach is typically sufficient on its own. That's why the Trauma Research Foundation is passionate about bringing you this program, Integrate Mind Body Practice for Working Through Trauma. Our goal is to share a diverse range of body-based therapies with as many people as possible for free. We want people to know there are many options available and to have the hope that some may be helpful to them. Another goal of this program is to give us the chance to not just talk about the approaches, but to embody them ourselves by practicing together. And that's what we're going to do today, practice embodiment. And we hope you walk away with a tool you can use or share right away. To help us connect to ourselves during the session, we'll practice trauma-informed presence and disable the chat during certain portions. We'll also have time for a short Q&A at the end of the session. I'm Mary Frangie, and I produce Integrate, and I'm joined by Connor McCann, working quietly behind the scenes. As a quick notice regarding potentially sensitive content, this is a live, unscripted webinar, and there may be topics, language, or stories shared that could be sensitive for some participants. But we're absolutely excited to introduce to you Luis Mojica and his session, Food Therapy, Use Cravings as a Somatic Compass to Discover Your Unmet Needs. Luis Mojica is a somatic educator, nutritionist, and founder of the Holistic Life Navigation. The heart of his work connects nutrition and trauma recovery with a focus on the nervous system, which you can learn more about in his book, Food Therapy, published by Hay House in April 2026. Luis, we are really grateful for your work and for you. We're so happy you're here. Please take it away.
Thank you so much, Mary. Hello, everybody. I'm just sitting here as you were introducing Integrate and TRF, just feeling a lot of gratitude because I remember it was nearly a decade ago when I was sitting down in my private practice, opening up The Body Keeps the Score. And it initiated me into the field of somatics right when I was trying to figure out where I wanted to go next. And it did so by bridging the gap for me between mental health, stress recovery, trauma healing, and nutrition. It's a gap that still exists, that's slowly starting to be bridged. But I'm hoping today I can give you all a little bit of information and then some actual experiences in your body with some practices so you can start to understand how your relationship to food can greatly impact your body's ability to recover from stress and trauma. As Mary said, I have a book coming out April 28th called Food Therapy. And anyone who pre-orders the book can do a 2-month book club with me for free. It will be a live virtual session with replays. So if you want to go in a little deeper, that's a great way to do so. And that information will be shared with you after this is over. I think where I want to begin is just giving you a little introduction to me and my story and how I got here, because a lot of my experiences are really where I work from still in my heart and my body. I was born into what's known as an intersex body or an intersex condition. And throughout my development, my body had a competition between testosterone and estrogen. And I ended up making more estrogen than average for a biological boy. And so in the ninth and 10th grade, I started developing breast tissue and hips, and I had this very ambiguous puberty that led to lots of bullying and assault and self-hatred. And holding all these things myself resulted in such incredibly painful anxiety, such pressure, such self-hatred, such fear of the world and people, that the only way I was able to quell those really big sensations coming up were through eating. So I learned at a very young age, right around the 5th grade, going into 6th grade, If I was able to sit down and get my hands on a lot of food, I could temporarily down regulate my system. I didn't know this, of course. I didn't know this consciously. I was just doing this instinctively. Many years later, when I started studying nutrition and working as a nutritionist, I was seeing this happening with my clients. I was seeing people's focus on long-term health goals. I was seeing focus on weight loss and lowering blood pressure and healing skin conditions and insomnia. But no one was actually noticing how it was affecting their stress levels and thought that was interesting. So people might be on healthy diets, things we would call healthy, and they might have certain health outcomes, but their stress wasn't getting better. Their symptoms might have been, but their nervous system is still really activated. So I spent many years categorizing different foods and understanding which foods biochemically increase stress response and which don't. And it was a massive light bulb moment to realize someone's breakfast can actually be putting them into fight or flight because of how it metabolizes, whereas someone else's breakfast can actually set them up for 4 or 5 hours of nervous system regulation. So in 2018, I started using nutrition as a tool for nervous system regulation. And just like we use somatics and EMDR and breath work and psychedelics, all these really important modalities, food is arguably the most consistent practice we engage with every day. Mostly unconsciously for a lot of us, we don't see it as a practice, but it can greatly reduce or increase your stress response. And then it makes all the work you're doing much more effective. So just with that in mind, I just want to give you all, orient you to where I'm coming from with this philosophy and why I'm bringing nutrition to this field of trauma, because nutrition is a beautiful portal into health, absolutely, but it's also an incredible tool for nervous system regulation. So even that being said, the first thing I want everyone to do is just pause and ask themselves, first of all, think of the last thing you ate, or depending on what time it is, what you're craving to eat. And just ask yourself, how does this food support me? And just pause to see if your body gives you an answer. If you feel excitement, if you feel comfort, if you feel a sense of ease, if it's a delicious flavor, how did that food or how does this food support you? What does it offer you? Seeing it as a practice for how it actually affects your body in real time as you're eating it, minutes afterwards, hours afterwards. I have a philosophy I teach called finding safety in yourself. It's the baseline of my work. And I developed it once I started studying somatic experiencing and really understanding how the body stores trauma through tension. So we might have stories, we might have events, we might have memories, but that shows itself in the body now as tension. So a body that's bracing against the world. And when that bracing can open up, when it can soften, in that moment, we're releasing the trauma. This is what it means when you hear people talk about trauma release. The body is literally letting go of the bracing. It doesn't feel in danger. So foods will do the same thing. They will create more of that bracing, or they will help you access some of that internal regulation or safety and alleviate the bracing. So I first want to walk you through two practices because the title of this session is Cravings as a Compass, and that's where we're going. That's the direction I'm going to take you in, and we're going to do some deep work around that. But there's two practices beforehand that are really important for everyone who is new to my work, and especially if you're new to somatic work of any kind. So this first one is called Finding the Safety. And again, the philosophy of finding the safety is there's some place that lives inside of us that's untouched, which is a very important thing to consider because when you have childhood developmental trauma like I did, or you grow up in a situation of a lot of chronic stress or abuse, it can feel like there's nowhere inside that's untouched from these experiences you went through. However, when you take a little time to track it, which I'll do with you in a moment, you'll start to feel how some places have maintained their sense of self and safety, even in the face of serious pain and adversity. And, one of the teachers that really propelled me into this practice and this understanding was the beautiful poet Maya Angelou. And she had this very simple phrase she would say. She would say, you have to find a place that lives inside of you and you have to keep it clean. a place that doesn't get violated from anything in the world. It's yours to be in. And I thought, what a beautiful concept. And then as I was sitting with them more, I realized that's how I survived. I discovered music at a young age, and I would play music in my room and I would write songs. And that was this really early intuitive parts work that I was doing of touching into these internal landscapes that felt good to be in when external landscapes and other parts of my body just felt like absolute hell. So I want to walk you through right now what it feels like to find the safety and your potential, your ability to do that. It will be different for everybody here. So the first thing we do is get in some kind of position where your head is able to be held. And if you don't have a backrest or a wall to lean on, you can always use your hands and hold your head too. The reason why you want to start with your head being held, and you can even test this with me, if you sit up or you don't let the head be held, you'll feel all this tension that has to brace just to hold you up. This is just a healthy posture response, healthy tension. When you lay back and you let the head be held, you'll start to feel a softening of some of those muscles that had to hold you up. We want to access that first because that softening then lets you feel places that are tense. And it's hard to do that when you're tensing up to hold yourself. So just take a moment to feel whatever's holding you and how much of your body you can allow it to hold, how much you can sink into that support. And the first thing we can actually notice is the tension. That's usually what gets most people's attention. So you can notice your jaw, your throat, your shoulders, your chest, your belly, just this line here, all the way down to the belly button. And just pick one place and put your hand over the one place where you just feel a little bit of pressure, a little bit of bracing. And we're not trying to get rid of it. We're not analyzing it. We're not even going into a story about it. We're literally just locating a place that's tense while our body's being held by something else. And we do that in order to then find the opposite. So with your hand on a place that's tense, now track and just look for something that isn't tense or a place that's even less tense, which might be accessible, more accessible for some of you. And with your other hand, you put your touch there. For me, a little tension in my chest, my belly's really soft. So just notice, where do you feel a softness? Where do you feel an ease? Where do you feel a sense of ground or peace? Put your hand there. And where do you feel a little tension, a little pressure, a little constriction? Put your other hand there. Just so you can feel the difference. I'll give you a few seconds in silence to do that. So now that you're tracking these, we're just going to dip into the softness. Okay, so you can always come back to the tension another time. We're going to dip into the softness if you can put both your hands over that soft place. And just center your breath. The intention here is to deepen into it, not to analyze it, not to question it, just to deepen into your presence and your ability to actually experience it sensationally. And this is where it gets interesting. A lot of you are going to notice as you settle into a place that's soft, which means a place that's unguarded, other guard starts to come up. Your shoulders might rise. You might think of something stressful. You might get distracted. That's all okay. Just use your hands to create a little pressure and come back to the place that's soft and just breathing into it. And one of my favorite questions when you're touching into this is, how does this place want to move? How do I breathe from this place? What thoughts emerge from this place? What emotions might be here? I'm just going to give you 30 seconds in silence just to commune with this part that feels open, that feels unguarded, that feels safe to show you what it's holding, to show you how it wants to live in you. So the first part of the practice, I'm teaching you two practices back to back. This first part is finding the safety. If you're having a hard time finding the safety, if you only seem to find tension or you start numbing out or dissociating, that's very common. This is not a bad thing. This is your body saying it's at capacity. And this is what's interesting about that. These places that are safe, that are unguarded, they're not bracing. Bracing becomes associated with protection because we brace to survive certain experiences and situations, even eras of our life. And when you develop in that bracing pattern, your body really relies on it for a sense of safety, interestingly enough. Even when it's uncomfortable, it feels safe still. So when you start touching into a place that's not bracing and other parts of you start to soften, your body will actually feel threatened by that initial physiological change because you're letting down your guard. So part of this is just experiencing safety on a somatic, sensational level, which can be new for some of you. The other part of it is it actually acts as a bit of a diagnostic, really, of how deep, how possible, how potential is my capacity to actually sit with a place that's unguarded? How much does my body rely on being guarded and braced to get through something? How safe is bracing? How dangerous does a lack of bracing feel? And I'll give you again just 15 seconds or so just to review that with yourself right now as we did that. We'll have plenty of time for questions and some back and forth. Even we'll open up the chat in a little bit after the next practice so you can get a sense of how it's landing for you. But I wanted to start with this because I have found it absolutely moving and profound that in many of the most painful situations in my life and other painful situations in other people's lives, when you establish that there's this place in you that I'm calling safety, this place that doesn't brace, and you practice just a few minutes a day, touching it, tracking it, breathing into it, it's like working a new muscle. You're working this new part of your body, and even a different response from your nervous system is being conditioned and practiced. And that is to essentially develop and tend to a place that already has some safety, and eventually, over time, make that place bigger, allow it to go deeper, and you feeling more comfortable in that. This place acts as a counter vortex. So when something external is happening, it's really stressful or overwhelming, especially in the modern tech era where we're witnessing horror from around the world, just in your living room all through the day. It's important to be able to pendulate back to this place. What's mine and what am I witnessing? Because that's the difference between empathy and enmeshment. If I'm enmeshed in what I'm seeing, I'm confusing someone else's situation for my own. A lot of people will experience chronic functional freeze, and this drives even compulsive eating habits for people to try to downregulate all the stress from becoming enmeshed in a situation that isn't theirs to begin with. Empathy is I can witness and feel for that person, that situation, and I can touch into my reality of safety right now, which actually makes you more useful when it comes to activism, responding, holding space for people, because you're coming to the world with way more capacity. And you have that discernment, what's mine, what's yours. So, as simple as this practice is, it can blossom into really profound lifestyle changes, behavioral changes, relationship changes, and even personal experiences within yourself that will transform over time. This goes right into my second favorite practice, and then I'm going to open up chat a little bit to hear how it's landing. This practice is called feeling the now. And if you think about what I just said about enmeshment and empathy, feeling the now is one of my favorite practices for this. It's essentially a pendulation practice, which just means touching into different experiences. Where am I? Let me attune to where I am and orient, and then can I feel it in my body? Is the tension I hold congruent with where I am right now? I've been working with trauma for over 8 years now. And what I've learned from my own traumatic experiences and from others is it's really a condition that's just the body not realizing where it is. As simple as I can put it, it's remembering the past and still reverberating like an echo from those experiences, or it's bracing in anticipation for the future. Most of us, when we have the ability to think over something painful, it's actually because our environment right now is lacking threat. So the safety in the environment prompts the internal dialogue of rerunning pain that has been experienced. If you think about times where you've been in real-time crisis, real-time threat, real-time trauma, you're not thinking about it. You're just, the body is taking over and responding. It's actually very thoughtless. And it's afterwards we can actually think about it and consider it and even reenact and replay things. So I like to say that because when you're replaying a lot in your mind, and you're not doing this, you're not consciously replaying it, it's being replayed in your mind. That's often a very signal and sign that you are physically safe right now, even if internally it feels otherwise. And this practice will help you actually experience that, not just take my word for it. So again, I want you to feel where you are, just physically, what supports you. You can do this walking, you can do this sitting down on a chair like me, you can lay on a bed. I want you to decide what feels more supportive. So if you're walking, just walk a little more slow and breathe into it. If you're still and you're lying or being held like me, let the head be held again. And all you need to do for this practice is scan the room with your eyes, scan the environment you're in, and look for one thing that's pleasant, one thing you like, one thing that's beautiful, one thing that brings up a beautiful memory. It doesn't matter what it is. Once you land on that one thing, really gaze into it, give it your attention, and then take a breath and scan where you feel the thing you're looking at in your body. It's amazing how we can look at something and not even feel it. So look at it and then put your hand on wherever you feel the response in your body from it. I'll give you 30 seconds here without me talking to find that thing in your room, your environment that you love, that settles you, that's beautiful, and then put your hand where you feel the response from that thing. And then with your hand there, just give it a little pressure just to really feel what it's like for a part of your body. Don't worry about the whole thing, but this one part of your body is attuned, in tune. I'm looking at a plant with something in your room, something in your environment you can connect with that tells your body right now you're safe. Just feel how that feels in a part of you. Remember, it's not all of you. And we want to feel this so we can get a sense of these other sensations. Are you holding anxiety as well? Are you holding a bracing and a tension as well? Are you overwhelmed? Do you have fear that's unexplained? Do you have anger or frustration? These other things that are being held in the body. This practice lets you pause to ask yourself, are these sensations congruent with my current environment? And not your current era, but your current moment right now in time where you stand or sit. And notice that, look around, like really take in the room. It can even be helpful to look behind you. The animal body loves when we look behind us because it tells it there's nothing behind you waiting to jump out. And just ask yourself, are these other feelings of fear, pain, overwhelm congruent with where I sit right now? Or are those things landing in me from past, future? It doesn't make them less valid, by the way. Congruent and valid are two different words. Congruent just means, is it caused by this moment, or is it left over, or in anticipation of something else? I'll give you 30 seconds for that before we open up the chat. And then I would just love to hear, a sentence or so. Mary will open up the chat. If you just write what you're noticing, we'll have time for Q&A at the end, but what you're noticing, what your own wisdom that's coming up as we feel into the safety, the part that is embracing, and we also notice the room we're in and how we attune to it, and getting a sense of what feelings are congruent to where I am, What are reverberations of the past? What's a bracing for the future? Just write a sentence or so. I'm going to look at the chat and see what comes in. And if you're still tracking, just track as I look at this. I'll read a few things as they come through. It feels so healthy to connect with myself in this way. I love that. Feeling of love and openness. Beautiful. Looking out the window at the sunshine and just notice how that feels in your body when you do that. I felt like crying when I touched the softness. Yes, that's very common that tears will come. Peaceful and loving. I'm feeling a lot of gratitude as I look at a throw that a friend made me years ago. So I want to touch on that. What's really powerful about our current environment, if you look around, there actually tends to be a lot of things that support us in our current environment. There might not be people that support you in your life right now if you're having any issue with people, but there is stuff, there are objects, there are beings in your environment that hold some kind of important association with your body and safety and love and comfort. So attuning to the room is such a powerful way to actually receive the support that's always around you, but very difficult to notice. Someone wrote, I can't find the safety or soft, unguarded spot inside of me. I feel afraid that it doesn't exist, but I loved finding my keyboard in my room and recalling beautiful memories of making music with it. Okay, this is a great example. So, finding the safety and feeling the now, they're two different practices. I actually prefer feeling the now for someone that's going through this because finding the safety can be too confrontational, it can be too much of a leap. But feeling the now is not a leap when you actually, just like this person said, oh, there's a keyboard. Oh, there's memories of making music with it. Okay, where do those memories live in your body right now? That's the safety. That's what's so cool about it. So the safety is always in here. We just can't always feel it, but these things in our environment can prompt it. And that's an example of that. I'm going to read a couple more, and then we're going to move into the larger practice around cravings, and I'll explain those a bit. I am noticing that I feel emotional release through tears in my eyes and distracted, a bit braced still. Yes. There's another practice I love called pendulation where you go between those differences. There's some release in my eyes, some tears here, but my chest braces. Very common, my friends, because when something starts to release because it's letting go of the guard, another place then gets guarded. This is a constant dance that happens in the body, pretty much for life. I mean, this happens in me, and I do this work 8 hours a day for 10 years. So it's important to get a sense of this guard back and forth, this kind of tug of war, very normal. Try not to judge that. That's going to happen. Being able to touch into both is very important. I'm going to see maybe one more. These are all so beautiful, it's hard to even pick one. Okay, I'm gonna do one of these where I just do this and see where my finger lands. So grateful and full of love in my heart as I notice my beautiful home that is my safe place. My dogs that keep me safe and loved. Grateful I am safe now. I'm glad I read that one because that's what I was thinking in my mind as I was teaching it. Feeling the now is such a powerful safety gratitude. It's a gratitude practice of really safety because the privilege of safety is not to be squandered. It is so important to be able to feel when there's an absence of threat in your life, to feel the difference between witnessing someone else's danger from your place of safety, as well as witnessing, reverberating, feeling the echoes of past danger, even the fear of future danger from your current place of safety. And a lot of, nowness, mindfulness approaches attempt to work toward this, and they do very well cognitively. But this practice is not cognitive, it's a felt sense. And that's why I love it. You can't spiritually bypass this practice. You either feel something settle or you don't. And some people will realize my body doesn't believe it's safe right now. No matter how much I look around this room at beauty, my body just can't catch up. That's okay. That happens sometimes. It's just not ready to. That's fine. Now you have more awareness of what your body's going through. Whereas other people will realize, wow, I didn't realize how much safety I had. I didn't realize my stomach could settle into this chair by looking at this plant. So you're going to learn a lot about your nervous system and your body's ability to feel where it is right now and pick up on the lack of danger and safety as you do these practices. What I want to move into is a little bit about the cravings as a compass, as a portal to really understand the subconscious unmet needs you carry. I love teaching this. There's a whole chapter in my book on this because it's so juicy and it really has become a lifestyle for me. So it's not just even with cravings, it's with a lot of different behaviors. I first developed this when I was working with people who were addicted, particularly in this case to heroin. It was incredible to work with them around finding these unmet relational and emotional needs that drive the desire, the impulse to use heroin. And I started realizing the same is true for my clients with food. I had developed a binge eating disorder that lasted nearly 25 years. The same was true for me. There were emotions, emotional needs, and there were relational needs that were driving these cravings. Things like, I'm exhausted from work. And if I drink some coffee, it will give me a boost of energy and clarity and joy. I need joy right now. So coffee satisfied the emotional need, let's say, of joy. There's a woman I worked with very recently who was every night eating a lot of ice cream and being very hard on herself because she didn't want to eat ice cream, but she was. And when we did this practice, she realized, oh, I used to eat ice cream with my dad, and my dad has passed away. So I'm going to the ice cream because I'm trying to feel him still. And this flavor, this ritual, the smell, the creamy texture, all of those things are overcoupled in the time I spent with my father. So she realized she was meeting an unmet relational need and emotional for sure by eating the ice cream. And this is what really propelled me into trauma work. Because as a nutritionist, my training and my understanding was through health. So if someone came into my office and wanted to get healthy and told me they eat ice cream every night, the obvious thing would be stop eating ice cream every night. That doesn't work. I think maybe 80% of my clients, that wouldn't work. 20% it did, but it was very rare. And then when I started understanding the soma, the body, and what it stores, and when I understood emotions and trauma and the physiology of these things, then I started realizing all these foods literally help us tolerate the intolerable. They help us, they hold our hand through grief, they hold our hand through divorce, they hold our hand through long work days, through exhaustion, through depression, through raising our kids. These foods literally hold us biochemically through these experiences. Without them, the experiences are so intolerable for our system that we can't function. So it's not a small thing when you have a craving. It's really not a small thing. And I'm happy for any of the practitioners that are on this call because this is an accessible practice you can bring to your patients and your clients, even if you have no nutritional background, because it's a relational practice. It's not about food or nutrient advice of any kind. So, with that in mind, I want you all just to think about a food, a beverage, even a food habit like skipping meals or eating a lot of extra servings, whatever it is that comes up for you, the thing that you rely on to get through something difficult. You have a bunch of emails. What do you grab to get through that? What's your reward, right? You're exhausted. What do you grab to wake up? You're having a really hard day. You just want to break down and cry. What's the food you would pick up? And in this case, I would actually ask for the chat to be open again. I would love to hear examples. Just tell me the situation and what the food is that you move towards so we can get some collective wisdom here. Sugar, caramel, or Captain Crunch. Ooh, I know that Captain well. Captain and I go way back. A sweet drink of some sort, spicy food, chocolate in response to sadness and lack of joy. Tea, I drown myself in tea. It depends. The craving changes for me. Just pick one. There's many, just pick one for the sake of the practice. Anxiety, I reach for carbs. Absolutely. Anxious and exhausted, cheese crackers. Yep. The extreme terror of my history. Quesadillas late at night. Yep. After a hard day. Coffee with creamer, chocolate. Okay, we're getting the idea. Fried chicken, red wine, peanut butter, and chocolate. Okay, so let's pause now. Pick one thing. So some of you had several, just pick one thing. And same idea, let your head be held, come into a posture being supported, and in your mind, really imagine it. Imagine the smell of it, imagine the taste of it, the temperature, the texture. Really, really embody what it's like when you're eating this. And give that a real good moment to feel. And as you're imagining this, really ask yourself, how does this support you? Is there anxiety here? And you're eating it and quells the anxiety. Is there fatigue and a sense of depression and it lifts you up? Does it give you pleasure when you feel completely bottomed out? Does it give you focus when you lack motivation? Just take a moment to feel that, to get a sense of what does this offer you? What does it shift in your body? Give you 30 seconds to be with that. And really make sure to put your hand over the place that loves this. Like, I want you not to feel the judgment or the thought, but what it gives you. Where it feels so good when you eat this thing. Put your hand there. Let's really celebrate that first. Just feeling into that. Giving it your breath, giving it some attention. And then I want you to imagine that someone takes it from you or that you can't access it, you can't get it for some reason. And really track the place that braces. This takes us right back to these two different sensations, right? A softness and a tension. Let's go to the part that braces. So keep one hand over the pleasure, the medicine, the support, whatever it gives you, and track where you feel it bracing. Again, I'll give you 30 seconds to be with that, where you feel a place that braces if you imagine this being taken away or you can't have it. Now, two things to track here. One place is feeling what you get from this, how it helps you, how it supports you, the benefit. The other place is feeling what state it's actually taking care of. So that pressure, that anxiety, that tension, that big emotional response to this is being taken away, really take a moment to name that. Is it anger? Is it sadness? Is there a memory there? Does it take you somewhere? Just get a sense of the information that's in the charge around not having access to this food. And consider as you hold this, as you touch in, as you tend to this, that information coming up, this is what the food is either suppressing or soothing or even stimulating you out of feeling. This information, this tension, this charge, these memories, emotions, these are the unmet emotional relational needs. These are the unmetabolized things that propel us toward these foods. The food tends to these parts for us, so we don't actually ever get to know them, especially if you started like I did at age 9 or 10. You developed like this. This is the way you live now. So touching into this for a few minutes is actually pretty big work because we don't all have the capacity to feel this thing that, again, food was feeling or taking care of it for us. So I'd love to know in the chat, just a real brief, couple sentences. What are you noticing right now before we go on? What are you feeling?
And Louise, could you clarify when you place your hand on the area, are we meant to breathe into that area to subside the tension?
A great question. So you're meant to breathe into it actually to get in touch with it. The goal is not to try to calm it down. So if I feel tension in my chest, I'm breathing into the tension to touch it, not to quell it. So just notice that, okay? We're really wanting the tension to actually come up and speak to us because what the food does, especially if you tend to eat a lot of food or you eat a lot of the depressant foods like I did, you're pushing down what wants to emerge. So we're giving it a few moments just to emerge to show us what we're usually holding. I'm going to read a couple of things. We have some good examples here. I've realized that I crave salty snacks. I notice that what truly satisfies me is feeling the crunch as I chew. Yes, it gives me a sense of pleasure and self-control. When I feel it's being taken away, it feels just like having my baby bottle snatched away, like a little girl. This is very common that the memory is very young, and there's a lot of good information there. So just notice that. Abandonment, lack of joy, noticing the idea of taking it away calls me to feel hurt, lonely, and rejected. My throat feels like it's closing at the thought if my choice to skip meals was taken away. Yes. Notice that throat closing. It's such a bracing pattern, such a fear of losing what that gives you when you skip a meal. I noticed that the areas where I initially felt softness were the same areas I felt the tightness when thinking about not having the food. That's my experience quite often, is the place that gets medicated, let's say, is the place carrying the pain or whatever is looking for the medicine, the support of the food. Gonna read one or two more. Defensive, wanted to punch or hit something when it was being taken away. Memories of breastfeeding and having that stop as a baby. Very, again, very important. These young relational ruptures that come up when we have the rupture in the food habit. Isn't that fascinating? One more. I'm eating sweets to manage tension. I feel the tension in the bracing in my shoulders, neck, lower back, entire spine, and whole back. So we're almost done. We're actually still in the practice. I just wanted to get some examples so we have a sense of what's coming up. The very final thing we're doing with this practice is putting our hand, if you took it off, putting your hand back on that loud part, the charge, the activation, the emotions, these things that I'm reading. Putting your hand back there, giving it your attention and your breath, and asking it in your mind or out loud, how else besides food can I support you? And that doesn't mean instead of food, in addition to, right? So, in addition to eating these cookies, how else can I give you comfort? In addition to drinking coffee for energy, how else can I support the exhaustion? And let's give that 30 good seconds just to feel. And you can go to the chat and write the answer that you get, and I'll read them in a bit. So you're touching into this place that feels big emotions around the food being taken away or the habit being taken away. And you're asking it, how else can I meet your need? How else can I support you? And see what the response is. And you can put that in the chat. And what I'll speak to as I wait for some to come in is the purpose of this is to break the habit of diet culture, which is either completely avoid the craving or just give into it. There's different thoughts in the culture of food. There's this beautiful middle place, which we're doing right now. Let's use the cravings as a signal from these subconscious parts. It touches, as you can feel, it touches you right into a somatic experience of where you hold some pretty potent information. And then when you pause before eating, let's say, a slice of pizza, and you ask it what's going on, you get a sense of what you're carrying as you eat the pizza. So for some people, they pause and they ask this question, how can I support you? And it might say, I need a nap. And I've done this myself. And you go down and take a 10-minute nap, you wake up, I don't even need pizza anymore. The nap took care of it. Other times, I take the nap, I wake up, I still want pizza, but at least I took a nap. So it's not a trick to keep you from eating something. It's a practice to interrupt impulse because the more space and time you have between impulse, you get information. You get all this unmetabolized stuff that lives in you and drives many of your behaviors, not just food, relationship choices, how you respond to people, shows you watch, how you feel when you lay in bed at night. All that's living in there. And your daily cravings can point you in a couple minutes, like a compass, right to these things you carry. And then this question, how can I support you? These parts actually start teaching you what you need. And then you get to redevelop your relationship with yourself, which I think is absolutely spectacular. So I'm going to read some of these and then we'll open up the Q&A. More rest, more aimlessness. Love aimlessness. I want to be hugged. Sleep. Solitude and time with nature that includes gentle exercise. Green tea and a place to relax. Right there is a perfect example of what I said earlier. Love it. Music. I want love. Rewards, not punishment. Say a couple more. Stretch. Some attention. Sometimes these parts literally just want our attention, and that's enough. Connection with a kind person. Not to abandon myself anymore. Connection with loved ones. Okay. So as you see, interrupting a craving allows you to actually self-relate. This is a embodied parts work. Feeling these parts that emerge, relating to them, listening to them, getting information, then going about your day. It's a several minute practice. And in the resources from this session, I actually included the audio version. I've recorded finding the safety, feeling the now, and the craving, interrupting cravings practice. I've recorded them with lovely music, so you can sit back and put your headphones on, and I'll walk you through it after this via audio. So you can download that. And I have the book coming up, as you know, the book club. And then in July, I have a 6 month nutrition program, which is all this and so much more stretched across 6 months so we can really get into stuff. So those are future resources if you're feeling like you want to dip in a little further. I'll hand it over to Mary if we want to go into some Q&A.
Mm, thank you. A question that's come up a couple of times is, what if I don't feel safety? What if I'm not safe? What if I'm not in a safe place?
Yeah, it's a difficult question to answer without the example and without being with somebody. So I'll answer it generally based on what I've experienced with people. When the body is bracing, the body perceives every environment as dangerous. That's very important to understand. So when I'm sitting here in my beautiful office with all these plants, Mary's wonderful face, all these people here, and I'm sitting here, and if everything's doing this, which it used to do, my animal body believes something horrible is about to happen, whether it does or not. So actually getting into a posture of being held and finding a place that can naturally soften, not making it soften, but waiting for it to soften, then taking in the environment, you're able to pick up on the reality of, oh, I am actually safe. Now, let's say someone's in an environment where they're not safe. There's something actually in the environment happening, and there's a bracing. That bracing is congruent. Because the question is not, again, the practice isn't a formula to prove you're safe. It's an actual curiosity of, is what I'm holding congruent with where I am? If I'm sitting here and there's a dog growling at me and my body's braced, that's congruent. If I'm sitting here and my mind can see that I'm fine and my body's braced, that's incongruent. What's in here is still valid, but it's not in direct response to my environment.
A couple of folks have asked where your training comes from.
Yes, I trained with a place called the Trinity School of Natural Health in America. They do have a bunch of different programs. I trained back in 2010 as a nutritional counselor. I got a certificate in nutritional counseling. And then I went into a 3 year somatic experiencing program. I'm also a trained herbalist and I dabbled into life coaching, but it's not really my way. So I prefer nutritional counseling and somatic experiencing is what I toggle between. I had private practice for about 15 years, and then I went into just groups and teaching, and that's what I do now.
A couple of folks have asked about SIBO and if these practices can help with the anxiety around SIBO.
Yes, so this is a bacterial overgrowth in the small intestine that creates a lot of physical pain. It can create nutrient deficiencies, bowel issues, autoimmune issues. A lot comes out of that because so much, really, everything comes from the gut. The gut is like the root of a lot of our mental and physical imbalances. I love the way the question was phrased because there's two parts of this. There's the actual biochemistry of nutrition. So, how does food impact gut health? That's a whole other thing. I go into that in my 6 month program. And then there's what's my response to my state. So, these practices help with the response to the state. If my stomach is distended, if there's pain, if I'm fatigued because of this, if I can't eat certain foods, these practices actually help me relate to that state better and have more nervous system regulation as I navigate it, rather than these practices help heal it. That's where you get more into nutrition for health outcomes.
Is is there a practice or is the practice the same for overeating rather than cravings? Is it the same?
You got it. Yep. If you have that, and that was where I was. I went through certain periods of undereating. In particular, when I was misdiagnosed as overweight, I should say my breasts when I was growing up were misdiagnosed caused by my weight gain. When it was being intersex, it was actual breast tissue. So I thought when I got taller and when I lost weight, these breasts would go away and they didn't. And I panicked. And so I actually went into anorexia. But most of my life was overeating. The same thing is true for undereating. The same thing is true if you're craving pizza. You can be eating a meal that you would deem healthy and you can easily overeat it. So any food impulse, even one we're calling healthy, I would do this practice with. And that's why I don't use health as the terminology for how I quantify these foods. I actually put them into categories of stimulating, depressing, and balancing, because that's how they affect our nervous system. And that's the somatic experience of these foods. And I say that because someone like I also had this, you can develop orthorexia, where you rigidly only eat very specific foods, often very healthy foods, arguably. Yet you're showing up to these healthy foods with a physiology of a lot of stress and anxiety. And I would see this in people that are eating incredible foods that should be healing, but they're actually getting worse because of all the anxiety in their body that meets these healthy foods as they're eating them. So before you eat anything, you pause and you feel into that. And that's going to give you so much information as to what's propelling you toward that meal or that food.
Maureen's saying when you've been on a diet for 40 years, the ability to feel that you might have a solution seems impossible, especially when I can no longer move without pain. What do you say to folks that have dealt with issues for such a long time and feel hopeless?
Yeah. Well, I can say I've been you, so I get it. I actually, what makes me a little different and not very popular is I don't sell hope. I don't sell hope. So I won't respond to this by saying, don't worry, there's hope. What I'll respond to this by saying is one thing I bet you haven't been taught or hasn't been, maybe you haven't even had access to, is seeing food through a lens other than trying to fix yourself. Most people that have been on decades, like this 40 years, I think she said, of diets, the primary motivator is I will heal, I will be fixed, something will change. I like to remove that from my nutritional therapeutic work. I like to go into the relational place of how do I relate to the food? What does it teach me about myself? What's underneath the motivation to eat something? And then in these moments where, let's say, I'm still in pain after following a diet perfectly, how do I relate to the pain? Because the diet itself is this kind of intervention of trying to get rid of the pain. But what if I relate to the pain while also being on a diet to try to get rid of the pain? I think doing both is really important. And I find with myself, I can say, when I relate to the state that I'm trying to get rid of with food, a lot starts transforming in ways that are very mysterious to me.
Andrew's asking, you described it as a practice to interrupt impulse, and I find that I and others often suppress impulses, and it can be helpful to get more in touch with them. How do we discern between impulses to interrupt and impulses to allow?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
You described it as a practice to interrupt impulse, and I find that I often suppress impulses, and it can be helpful to get more in touch with them. How do we discern between impulses?
Oh, I see. I see. I get it now. Yeah, that's a good question. So this is actually where I go into the mind. A lot of you did this practice, not eating the food right now, but just thinking of it. And what I think, if I understand this correctly, and you can correct me, whoever asked that, if I'm wrong in the chat, I think what I'm hearing is which impulses are safe to allow, right? Because, for example, I developed this practice when I was working with people addicted to heroin. I would not want them to go use heroin, right? That was like life or death for them. But what we did very often was imagined using heroin, and all the information came right up because that was happening already for them. So if you have this thing inside of you that feels like, I don't want to allow this impulse, that feels really dangerous, you should definitely trust that instinct and don't think of it as impulse, think of it as memory. Peanut butter is a great example for me. That was my trigger food. So for years, when I was doing this practice with myself, I would just think back to when I was 10 and eating peanut butter, for example, and I would get all the information still that lived in me. I didn't have to actually go into the risk of the impulse taking over, if I understood the question correctly.
And Andrew, if you have any qualifiers, please reach out in the Q&A. Um, what if I can't feel anything?
Yeah, not feeling anything is quite interesting. Any of you that feel numbness, any of you that have clients that say, I feel nothing, I feel nothing is a feeling. There's actually a sense of nothing you can track. And that person that said that, or anyone here that relates to it, you can literally start to notice there's like almost a veneer, there's some kind of covering that lives over a part of you. It might feel a little muted, it might feel like a little pressure, a little heaviness. But the numbness is just a little thin protective layer over a lot of sensation. So when you feel nothing, it's actually a signal that there's a lot of activation that the body doesn't have capacity for right now. My absolute favorite practice for that is you let your head be held, and anyone can try this right now, and you get a pillow, and you put a pillow over your chest and belly, and you press it with your hands or you hug it, and you just take a breath and you feel what's behind the pillow. The pressure of the pillow gives you a little parasympathetic activity, so it down regulates a bit, which eases some of the bracing and allows a little bit of sensation to emerge. And in that emerging of sensation, you've just broken through the freeze and the numbness, and now you can work with what's in there.
How about folks with food reactions or anaphylaxis, um, or life-threatening, food allergies? How are can some of our therapists use these practices to work with them?
Yeah, I would actually, there's two things I would do. One, some people that have these severe allergic reactions, not just an intolerance, but almost life-threatening or sometimes life-threatening, they might still crave these foods. They'll never eat them, but they still crave them. So do the same thing we just did with the craving. The second part is I would do the relationship work with what is it like that that could happen? Because when you have an event like that, it almost becomes like a medical trauma in the body. And food itself becomes overcoupled with threat. So a lot of people won't even enjoy eating. They'll start losing their appetite or they'll show up to meals with attention, especially a meal they did not prepare themselves because of potential cross-contamination. So you want to work with tracking how the body is expecting food and threat to be together. And over time, helping them separate that so they can actually enjoy their food and orient to what they're eating now versus remembering the threatening experiences in the past. There's a lot of juicy work you can do there. I've done a lot of that work.
And relatedly, can food intolerance be related to past trauma?
I really believe so. There's a lot of different material coming out on this. Certain studies, there's something called German New Medicine, which is very interesting to check out. Um, Essentially, it works through understanding how histamines work. Your cells release histamines, which is what creates our allergic responses. And when you have chronically high adrenaline, fight or flight hormone, you actually have more of a tendency to release histamines. So there's certain people, or I should say all of us, there's certain situations where when your stress levels are really high, you can't break down the food you're eating as well. And then the proteins from that food can be seen as an invader, and you can have a histamine response. So there are a bunch of people I've worked with, and I've experienced this actually with gluten and dairy personally, where their nut allergies, gluten allergies, dairy, they subside after we work on the trauma response their body has around the food, because the body's associating the food with threat. Even if you were growing up in a situation where people were yelling at the dinner table, this overcoupling, this Pavlovian bracing against the food will lower the digestibility and then can create certain symptoms that get misdiagnosed as allergy when it's actually just an intolerance because it's a histamine response. Once the adrenaline comes down, the histamines come down and digestion changes quite drastically. I actually wrote about all that in my book, that part too.
Let's see. Do we have time for one more quick one? I know they're not really quick answers, though.
I can make it quick.
Allie's saying, I overeat or binge because I like the feeling of fullness. It makes me feel grounded. How can I feel grounded without feeling so full?
Yeah, I love this. This is something I'll briefly respond to with a term called postprandial blood flow. Postprandial blood flow, it's a term that just means how the blood shifts from the brain to the gut after you eat. The more food you eat in one setting, the more blood flow you have, the more blood decrease you have from the brain. That's very important because when you have anxiety, that anxiety, part of what fuels it is the blood pressure increases when you have more adrenaline, and that sends blood to the brain to give it all this energy to make you hypervigilant. So when that blood comes down to the gut because you ate a lot, you are temporarily lowering your anxiety response. So it's a true physiological event happening biologically inside your body from your brain to your gut. So what we do is when you're not eating as much, I want you to think of that you're going to titrate in more sensation. So the more you eat, the more you're lowering sensation, you're quelling it. The less you eat, the more you're titrating in sensation. So you want to do the somatic practices in between your servings, literally. You sit down to eat a meal, you want to eat as much as you normally would eat to fill you up. I'm not saying dieting, I'm saying literally fullness. You feel that physical fullness, you stop and you sit with that for a couple minutes. And you notice the parts that are bracing still and the parts that are settling. And when you start tending to that anxiety consciously, you won't need the excessive amount of food to do it for you.
Luis, this has been excellent, really life-changing for some people. That's what I've been seeing in the chat. So thank you so much for being here. We're so grateful. And thanks to our great audience. You've asked a lot of really wonderful questions. You can find the replay in the TRF Somatic Library along with the bonus audio versions of the exercises we did today. Thank you for that, Luis. And please share the recording with anyone you think could benefit from it. Invite your friends to this program. And I'm going to ask everyone to please respond to the surveys that pop up when you close your Zoom. If you look in your tab, there'll be a survey there or a link to a survey. Please respond. It really helps us understand what's working at Integrate. We appreciate everyone and we can't wait to see you next time. Thanks, everybody.